Hello to our viewers in Singapore and around the world. Welcome to our online celebrity chat show, Words and Music. The show speaks to celebrities to find out how they are adapting during COVID-19. My name is Loretta Elabons. Today on Words and Music, we speak to a legend in the world of photography, and his name is Greg Gorman. Greg has photographed the biggest names in movies, music, and television. From singers David Bowie and Michael Jackson to actors and actresses Leonardo DiCaprio, Elizabeth Taylor, Barbara Streisand, to name a few. Today, Greg speaks to me from his home high in the Hollywood Hills about his latest 400-page retrospective book entitled It's Not About Me, a collection of both color and black and white portraits of Hollywood idols that has never been published before. So let's watch. Thank you so much for taking time to do this, Greg. This is a show that we're doing. It was created during COVID-19. When we were not promoting all the live shows and the comedy tours, we decided just to stumble into this so-called online chat show so that we can connect with, artists, celebrities, and filmmakers around the world and people like yourself.
Yeah, no, I hear you because I'm feverishly trying to finish scripting a virtual class I'm teaching the week of the September the 7th. I have a couple of virtual classes coming up, and it's a hell of a lot of work. It's more work than doing things live, I can tell you, creating different insights and different approaches than you normally look at if you're live and in person. So you know what that's like producing live shows. So it's a different ball game.
So can you just let us know, where are you talking to us from today?
I'm talking from my home up in the Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles, California.
All right, excellent. So how has life been treating you?
Well, I feel very lucky because I have a beautiful home. I like to cook. I have 2 great dogs. And I have an assistant who basically does all my shopping and does everything. I really don't go out at all. And I haven't gone out at all. I'm your poster child for this virus, so I'm taking it pretty easy. It's pretty terrible here. How have you guys been doing there?
Well, our cases for COVID, I'm glad to tell you, has been coming down really good.
We're still at the crest of our first wave probably, and I think LA is up there on the Richter scale in terms of not behaving. People just not worried about it, and they just they think it's science fiction, and it's definitely is not science fiction. So
yeah, very sad, and we just hope the best. Things will improve. So now let's talk about your experience in Singapore.
I was in Singapore once a while back. I've only been there one time. I was there back at the very beginning of digital. I came over doing a dog and pony show for Epson, who make the big printers. And did an exhibition there and stayed there for about a week. Had a really good time. Fell in love with Spicy Stingray, one of your delicacies.
What year was that, Greg, that you were here? I know it was for a book, right?
2000 and, I don't know, 8 or 10, somewhere in there.
Okay.
A while back.
Yeah.
But I had a great time. Such a beautiful city and had a lovely time.
So you were here when we didn't have the casinos yet, because we have a beautiful casino, 2 beautiful casinos, and the one that's really outstanding is the Marina Bay Sands.
I might have been there. I'm trying to think when I was there. I was there, I think, before 2010. So
okay, so the casinos were not up yet.
Okay, probably not.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, I want to first, of course, start off with how you actually stumbled upon photography. And I'd like to hear it from you.
Okay, it's kind of old news and you've probably read it, but I grew up in Kansas City. I was born in 1949 and went to school back there. And on the weekends, I would go hunting and fishing with a good buddy of mine because it was Kansas. And on the occasion of a concert in Kansas City with Jimi Hendrix, I was able to get very good tickets, and I borrowed my buddy I used to go hunting and fishing with, his camera to take pictures, having no knowledge whatsoever of photography. And I said, what should I do? And he said, shoot Tri-X film at a 60th of a second, f/5.6, and you'll probably get an image. So I shot a couple of rolls. The following morning, I went over to his home in his basement. We processed the 2 rolls of film, and I saw the pictures coming up on the tray and the developer, and I was hooked. I mean, I couldn't believe it. The picture was a little bit soft on the focus, and I wasn't sure if it was because I shot at a 60th of a second or I'd smoked too much pot that night. It was back in the hippie days, as you can imagine, the late 60s. But that kind of got me interested in photography. And my initial foray was in photojournalism because that's what they offered at the University of Kansas, where I was attending school. But I ended up finishing up at the University of Southern California in film, and then stayed in California and went back to my beloved still photography because I was too much of a control freak to move into the filming into the movie business, although all my work has obviously been tied to the movie industry.
One thing I couldn't find on the internet, what became of those photographs that you took of Jimi Hendrix?
Oh, they're on the internet, or I can certainly send you some. You edit this.
When you took those photographs, when those photographs were developed...
Nothing came up. They were just, they're stashed away with all the rest of my negatives in cold storage where I probably belong. I have everything filed away. They weren't anything special, Loretta. They were just, concert pictures. But I shot a lot of concerts in the beginning. I mean, really the beginning of my photography was shooting lots of rock concerts. Nothing's ever been done with any of them. I don't think they're anything necessarily special. I was going to rock concerts through that whole summer. I was still living in Kansas, and I was in California for the summer. My parents were divorced when I was quite young, and I would come out and stay with my dad, and in the evenings I'd go to concerts, rock concerts. And so I'd always take my camera and take pictures. And, I usually wasn't on top of the stage, so they weren't necessarily what I would consider monumental pictures, but, I shot all the bands and all back in the day, from Hendrix to The Doors to Cream to Janis, all of them at one point or another at the different clubs, the Whiskey A Go-Go, and, all over from that summer of 69, I guess.
Did Jimi Hendrix passing have an impact on you?
Well, I certainly respected him as an artist and loved his music. I didn't know him, but certainly that was a big shock. He was such a great artist. I saw him perform many, many times.
What aspects, of rock and roll did you like that led you to your chosen field of photography?
Shooting rock and roll is pretty far removed, as you can tell from looking at my work. Today, I always joke about the fact that I shoot still lifes. I tell people to sit down and hold still. But, in the early days, I was shooting live concerts, and I pretty much didn't really do much with that after I started my career. Occasionally, like with Bowie, I would sometimes shoot the shows for David. And with Elton, when Elton went on tour with Billy Joel, sometimes I would shoot the shows. But it's something that I didn't hold any interest in whatsoever. I didn't like running around with a camera and documenting. I'm not a documentary photographer per se. So that held very little interest for me. But I did have a long run, and I know your show's a music show, in shooting a lot of musical talent over the years, So I did a whole stint in the 80s in Nashville shooting all the country music people, Not the big legends, but a lot of pretty famous country music acts. But, on the other side, lots of music people from Michael Jackson to Bette Midler to lots with Bowie and Elton and Frank Zappa and God, you probably saw a bunch of them in the book, I think.
You come to California to get a degree in your photography. What happened after that, Greg?
I got my degree in cinematography, so kind of the flip side, yeah. So, while I was getting that, I was driving a truck around L.A. delivering photographic supplies. And at the time I finished that up, I got a job working, to give you a flying short course in all this, I got a job working for a company called Interocean Films, which was a company owned by the late Arnold Copelson. And they basically packaged feature films, not really feature films, more television films and small independents, and released them in Europe and in places like Singapore and all over the world. And they hired me to shoot the one-sheets and the posters, to work with the material. I wasn't necessarily shooting the pictures. I was actually doing art direction work, which is kind of funny because it gave, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. They said, "Can you do one-sheets and all this?" And I said, "Sure." It was a girlfriend of mine at the time was working for them. And I thought, why pass up this opportunity? And so consequently, it's kind of ironic because a lot of my career was based on shooting things for the cinema, a lot of movie posters and one sheets. So it gave me a nice foundation for kind of seeing what worked, what images were arresting and stopped one's eye when you were looking at it. So I did a little bit of work with that, and slowly but surely, I started shooting people. When I first moved out to California, before moving, I had actually photographed in Kansas City and photographed the Byrds right around the time of their 8 Miles High fame. And afterwards, I was back in the dressing room with them taking pictures, and the drummer says to me, "So what are your plans, Greg?" And I was, 18 years old and 17, 18 years old. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to move to California and become a photographer." And he said, "Well, if you need any help, here's my number. Give me a call." And sure enough, I called him, and I stayed at his home for 3 months while they were on tour, and became friends and shot some of the pictures for a couple of their albums. And met Leon Russell and shot his album cover for the wedding album, which was great. And little by little, it just started building up. And through some of my pictures that were being published in small independent rags in California, I was fortunate enough to meet Barbara DeWitt, who was the late sister of Bruce Weber. And she was a very big PR person, a publicist, kind of like Nadine, that helped put our interview together. And she actually asked me if I had interest in shooting David Bowie. And I said, yeah, that could be kind of great. And I couldn't believe it. We had become friends over the years socially. And little by little, she represented some people that I shot. I worked with her with Iggy Pop and with Frank Zappa and some really great artists. And she took me to New York to shoot David the first time. And it was, kind of the beginning of a long relationship that David and I had, and for many, many years. And
what year was that, Greg?
Around 78, I'm guessing. Around the time of Scary Monsters, that album, Ashes to Ashes, that time. And they had shot that album cover, but I did publicity and some press for that. And then I shot a handful of album covers for David, quite a few.
And this was all in California?
No, all over the world. I shot David in New York many times, in L.A., at my studio here in L.A. I shot David in London. I did the Blue Jean video with David in London. In L.A., I think we did Never Let Me Down. And in New York, we did Let's Dance and Changes 2, Bowie Rare, a bunch of them. Anyway.
Wow, impressive.
So kind of all over. I had a long stint with David, which I was very blessed and fortunate to do. We got on well and worked. We had a long run together.
As a person with no experience, no knowledge of photography, all I do is admire all the beautiful work that you've put out. So how do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally when you are going out to shoot and film these megastars?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, like anybody at the early part of their craft, as they're learning their craft and kind of finding their way, you're very careful and you pay attention, and you particularly focus on the needs of the people you're shooting with, which I still do to this day. I mean, I spend a lot of time garnering their trust and confidence during a shoot so that basically they feel comfortable. That's really a big part, in working with talent, because they're as afraid as you may be if you're intimidated as well. And one of the things you can't share with the talent is fear and intimidation, because they'll eat you alive. So you've got to maintain a certain level of not only professionalism, but you need to meet them eye to eye. And the most important thing is to be open and honest and sincere. And I think with the more talented and the more well-known people, you can't really bullshit them. There's no bullshitting. That people, you can't, like they say, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. So you've got to pretty much know your craft. You also have to present a feeling, an air of confidence going into those shoots. If you come into a shoot and you're asking the talent, well, what do you think? Do you like this? How do you feel about it? Then they're going to get nervous because they're going to think you don't know what the hell you're doing. So, it's being open and positive about experimenting and playing, but also and listening. Listening is a big key part in working with celebrities in terms of making sure that you hear what they're saying. That's a huge thing when you're shooting, and reading body language, is huge.
When you're shooting an artist like Michael Jackson, and I would imagine someone like him would have a lot of minders around him.
We should definitely talk about Michael because I liked him very much. But yeah, sometimes they do have a lot of handlers.
Where do you get your direction from? From, say, example, when you're shooting Michael Jackson, how do you put forth what you want to do and how you want to shoot the artist?
Everybody kind of has, a lot of people have different stories, and different approaches how it works. How David and I worked together, how Michael and I worked together. With Michael was amazing. About 2 weeks before we would do a shoot, and we worked together 4 or 5 times, he'd call me, and we would talk for like an hour or so on the phone, hour or two on the phone, and discuss what we were going to shoot. And he would tell me his ideas and what he wanted to do. And when he came in, it was like working with an art director. I don't think there ever was an art director on the scene when I shot Michael. We would have our concepts put together. I would generally hire the stylist who would bring the clothes to kind of recognize the imagery that he wanted to create. If you saw the pictures of him in the book, they're pretty kind of all over the place. Michael had a makeup artist that I worked with a lot with him, Karen Fay, who did his makeup. But Michael did not come with a lot of handlers. Michael came sometimes with a Sikh that did his cooking for him, and with Karen, and that was it, and 2 people, and not a big entourage, and that kept it very, very much more between us. And so he would generally hire me, as did David most of the time. But the bigger artists a lot of times would hire me to do a shoot, to do a profile of them, a current profile of them in terms of a range of looks of where their head was at this point, and the look that they wanted to. And of course, when you're dealing with talent like Bowie or Michael Jackson or some of the like, they had certain ideas of the images that they wanted to convey. And sometimes it was a reflection of their music, and sometimes it was a reflection of the style that they were wanting to move into and keep things challenging and surprising and new for people. So, and the images then would remain with the artist. They would do a buyout. And like with David would come out. We would sometimes shoot for 3 days in my studio, and he'd have stuff to cover all aspects and everything that he'd be doing for the next year. And he wouldn't have to do a lot of other photo shoots. Michael would call me, like the picture of him with the lace. He loved that picture of Gloria Swanson, that was, I think, taken by Steichen. And so we kind of copied that. And the spider picture, he basically called me up one day and he says, Greg, I have these pet tarantulas, and they've just shed their skin. And the skin of the tarantula looks exactly like the spider, so I'm going to bring him, and maybe there's something we can do with him. And so my stylist actually gaffer's taped the spider to his head, because it's a real spider. And the skin, and we made that picture. The more revealing pictures of him on my daylight wall, he always loved my figure studies, my male and female nudes, and wanted to do something in that vein, but obviously it had to be tasteful and something that made sense. And my stylist, she decided we would get some dance clothes, and the shot of Michael sitting down is in just dance clothes that were kind of ripped up. That's kind of how a lot of those shoots kind of developed.
You've developed all these relationships, with so many artists and celebrities. For actresses and actresses where you were shooting them for the first time, did you have such situations where you had to reshoot?
Rarely. Really, almost none. If it went that bad, it just went south, and that was maybe a couple times in my life. But basically, I try to spend time, like I mentioned to you, Loretta, coming up or down to their level prior to a shoot to make them understand and realize that I'm playing for their team. And I would share my vision with them in the old days with Polaroids, from the back, that you'd actually have a Polaroid to show them. Now, obviously, with the digital captures on the back of your camera. Studying their face, talking to them, trying to get a common thread to build on a bit of a relationship before the shoot. And at the same time, I always worked all throughout my whole career with a chef. I had my own personal chef at my studio who cooked, fabulous meals that we would have before the shoot. By the time the talent got there in the mornings, which was usually like around 10 o'clock, sometimes 9 or 10 o'clock, and by the time they were made up and we'd gone through wardrobe and we'd gone through this and that, it was lunchtime, and we'd have a nice lunch, and then we'd shoot all afternoon, sometimes into the evening with a second meal. But that gave everybody a chance to get to know each other and to kind of feel a vibe of everybody, and it boils down to, at the end of the day as well, Loretta, I can't take full credit for all of this, because basically a lot of what goes into the brand of, let's say, a Greg Gorman image is my team. So I work very carefully with a studio manager who worked with me for many, many years, a first and second camera assistant, sometimes a third camera assistant, my chef, my own personal retoucher for 35 years, done all my retouching still. The stylists and the hair and makeup people, they all, those people are part of what goes into the look that compose a Greg Gorman picture. So they know, how far to take the makeup or how far not to take the makeup. They know what not to bring in terms of wardrobe, what I like to shoot, what designers I like. And so, all of that becomes part of what will end up being hopefully a Greg Gorman legacy, so to speak. But all those people are responsible for what I've done over the years, and they all deserve a lot of credit. They're all mentioned in the book.
I did not know that, that you have this whole support team around you, because sometimes for the layman like myself, we just think that it's just you yourself shooting all those pictures. So it's great that, I understand this now, and that our listeners and viewers know that you have a good support.
It's very important to have a good team behind you.
How many celebrities have you photographed in your career?
I wouldn't even be able to give you a decent number. Thousands. For sure, thousands. When I went to edit this book with my dear friend Gary Johns, who's done a lot of my books with me, I had all the negatives and transparencies because most of it was analog. We're all in cold storage, where I keep all my files and everything. And it took me a year and a half just to go through all the boxes. I had 160 boxes about this big that, probably, and then, about that deep to go through. And then it took another couple of years just to kind of filter through what I could use. And what you're seeing in the book is just a very small representation of my career because I didn't really want to duplicate a lot of the pictures from my other books, except for some of the greatest hits, which obviously when you do a retrospective book, you've got to have some of the pictures that people are familiar with. But this is really the first book that really showcases a lot of color.
So just for our viewers and listeners watching, just tuning in right now, I just want to let you all know that we are very grateful to have Greg Gorman with us on the show today on Words and Music. Greg Gorman is an iconic Hollywood photographer. He has photoed many, many big-name celebrities, not only celebrities, but also film, TV, and also many, many magazines, famous magazines like Life, Time, Vogue, GQ, and the list goes, Interview Mag, and the list goes on. Now, Greg, before we get into your book that you were mentioning about, I'd like to also just talk about the magazine shoots you have taken. Could you just let us know how do you stumble upon taking these photos for magazine publications?
The greatest magazine, obviously, that I worked for in my career was Interview magazine back in the days. And that really was, Andy Warhol's genius. And it's really that magazine and the work that I did for that magazine really helped launch my career, no question about it. In those days, it was a completely different dance card than it is today, because basically we were given a celebrity that they wanted for a cover, and the rest was left to us. I mean, how we put it together, who our team was, what we dressed them in, although in later years they got more specific about specific wardrobe because of their advertising base. But pretty much I would find the location, put the team together, we would go shoot. I would then send to Interview a half a dozen pictures from maybe 5 or 6 setups. They would get 1 or 2 choices, and that was it. And then they'd get 4 or 5 choices that I would shoot against a white background that Richard Bernstein, the late Richard Bernstein, would paint for the covers. But it really, truly was the photographer's work that you're seeing in that magazine, and not a remnant of some misguided art director that had a specific concept of how he wanted to see somebody photographed, which became much more the case later on and in the lesser magazines or the more commercial magazines. Andy pretty much let the photographer that they chose. It was really the late Robert Hayes that I worked with from the onset. It was from my very first cover for them with Maxwell Caulfield, who was a young man who starred in Grease 2. He was kind of the darling boy off an off-Broadway play called Entertaining Mr. Sloan back in the day. And that really helped launch my career. That coupled with an advertising campaign that I did for LA Works, which is still running 40 years later. And the combination, I really think, between a dozen covers for Interview Magazine over the years and a 40-year running advertising campaign, the editorial campaign for Interview, and then an advertising campaign for LA Works, it really helped launch my career, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So now just coming back to your latest book, It's Not About Me. What was the inspiration behind the book?
Well, I thought, before I start pushing up daisies, it would be a nice thing to put together a big compilation of my work. I've done a couple of books, Loretta, that are pretty much are retrospectives. I did a book, this is my 12th book. I did a book called Inside Life around the early 90s, and then followed it up with a museum show I had in Verona at the Scavi Scaligeri with a book called Perspectives. They were both pretty much retrospects of my work, the latter being my portraits and my nudes. In this body of work, we decided I wanted to publish some of my color work that had never been seen, and I wanted to, at 71, revisit a lot of my work that I hadn't looked at in many years. And it's interesting, as a quite mature adult, I should say, or probably immature, one depending on how you look at me, coming back and revisiting pictures that I hadn't seen in so many years. And I found that sometimes for me it was the moment in between rather than the intended capture that amused me more. And so a lot of the pictures I think that you'll find in this book would not be the, quote, art director's choice if it was a specific assignment, let's say. It was more coming out of my head of a picture that sometimes it was staged by me, and sometimes it was a moment in between another shot that I was doing that actually held more of a fascination. Sure, I'd set the lighting and the style of the picture, but sometimes it was a moment in between that became a more intriguing photograph.
So do you have a backstory for each picture?
Stories for most of the pictures, I would imagine. Not all of them, but I remember where I shot most all of them. And, they go back a long time. But it was fun stumbling through. I did stumble through people I shot that I didn't remember shooting, and pictures I went, wow, that were like, let's say, really early on in some of their careers that I didn't remember shooting them. Gerard Butler, I had no idea that we had ever done pictures. And I see this folder in my box of negatives. It says Jerry Butler. And I'm looking at this very young, handsome, not buffed out guy, and it's Gerard Butler. But I shot a lot of people. In any case, that when I went back, it was kind of fun to see the pictures and go through them. And so my idea was, as it turned out, the book is 400 pages and change. Definitely one of my most commercial books, I would say, compared to my more crazy male nude books and female nude books or my other projects. But I think it's a nice compilation of my career, and I think Tenois did a fantastic job with the publication of the book.
And the title, It's Not About Me.
John's, my art director, came up with it. Gary had done art direction on a lot of my projects, and we did the LA Works campaign together for starters. So we go back to the mid-'70s together, and so he knows me really well. And he came up with the title, which I thought was really a great title. Because and it's kind of what we already talked a little bit about, when I do a photo shoot, I kind of put myself totally into it, and I put the talent at front and center stage, and I kind of take a back seat. That's not to say that I relinquish one little damn bit of control, but I definitely listen to what I'm hearing and focus on what it's going to take to make that picture special or make it an interesting photograph, while complimenting the person at the same time. And getting what I want. I guess that's the key, getting what I want in the style of lighting that I like. So, the book's interesting because it takes a turn as you will look through it, and you'll see some pictures that are very openly lit, kind of flat lighting. And those were early in my career, was I was finding my voice and my style of how I wanted to be perceived. I think every artist just kind of goes through a somewhat of a trial and error period of finding their voice, finding their rhythm. And, when I finally started taking the light off the center focal point of the camera and creating a stronger dynamic range, let's say, between my highlights and my shadows, I kind of found, something that interested me. I always said, it's not what you say in the highlights, but what you don't say in the shadows that makes a picture interesting. And so that's when I started to develop my style and a look that I think becomes consistent in my work.
How do we go about purchasing the book? Where can we find the book?
I think the book is now on Amazon. I think it's going to be released in the States the first week of September, and I think it's out in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100%, but I think if you Google it, you can find it. I have a hard time when I Google it to find it. I Googled it tonight to see where it's at because it was supposed to come out a little earlier, but I think it's on a boat on its way over here. With COVID, it's been a difficult time, and for me, it's been a very tough time because Nadine has done a fantastic job doing press, and I'm doing more and more now Zoom and Skype interviews, which is good. And domestically, I didn't really hire a publicist domestically. I'm doing a lot of Skype and Zoom and whatnot for PR, which I think is more the modern world. I think everything's more online today than it is on the printed page, which I have to say I find very sad in many ways because I think being old school, I like the smell of ink. I like the turn of the page. I don't want to look at my work online. And that all being said, I think, hopefully this coming year, by the early part of the summer, things will open up and we can start doing exhibitions and things. I had a show scheduled at my home gallery here in LA, but everything's on hold because of the virus until they figure out what's going on. And I don't think they're going to get it together before next year, to be honest. I think, if we're lucky, maybe can be looking at something early next year that should hopefully help everybody turn around and get back to having a real life. For me, I value this time. It's represented for me a lot of soul searching and inner reflection. And I'm not one of these esoteric type people, trust me. But I have really turned inside a lot during this time and realized how appreciative I am for what I have and where I am and how lucky and fortunate I am. I love to cook. I have a beautiful home up in the Hollywood Hills. I have 2 great dogs, an assistant that takes good care of me.
You mentioned really earlier on in our conversation is that you said you're a good cook. So I'm curious to find out, what are you cooking?
I cook a little bit of everything. Strangely, I love primarily Asian fusion. And, obviously I love seafood and I love sushi and I love Italian food very much. Not that I need to be eating a lot of Italian food, but I do love it. So I would say, those are the remnants of what I really like. So do you like to cook?
Yes. I try to cook easy things.
You have a great voice.
Thank you.
Have you done a lot of radio and stuff? And
I did in my previous life. And then I got sidetracked into the world of concert promotions.
Yeah, that's wild. And where are you from originally?
Singapore.
I had good Indian food, actually. I can't remember where we ate. I had pretty good Indian food in Singapore, actually. We had some pretty good food. We really did. I can't remember where we went. There was an area we went to that was an all Thai area. I remember there was a street that had all Thai food, but we also had really good Indian food somewhere. It's been so many years. Before you started doing the rock concerts and all that, what were you doing?
I was actually doing some television work. I was in front of the camera, and I got tired of it. I got tired of, just tired of the makeup, and I just didn't want to be, told what to do, and I just said, it's about time I do something that I love, which was, at that time in Singapore, there were not many great concerts coming through. And so my husband, who is American, I said to him, no, actually, Greg, I had a premonition. I had a dream. I saw concert lights flashing in my dream. And then suddenly, that gave me the confidence and the courage to kind of guide me into my current career.
Well, see, that's good. I mean, it's the same for me. I mean, I feel like I've been there, done that. My passion for photography has changed. I did it for 50 years, and it kind of melded into teaching. So now I mostly teach. I spend a lot of time teaching and in education, which I really enjoy. I had done it with the art directors and the ad agencies and the movie posters and the celebrities, and occasionally I do it with people I'm friends with. The person we never talked about tonight is the person on the cover of my book, who I'm still very dear friends with, Grace Jones. And Grace and I still work together all the time. And, I love doing shoots with her and hanging out. And we have so much fun together. And we did a shoot just this last year for Dust magazine for a cover. And That's the pictures in the book. Have you seen the book?
I saw the PDF, but I want to get my hands on the book. Yeah.
So, I made some great friends through the years, and so I cherish that. But yeah, I more or less teach. I still shoot some celebrity stuff, but not, not on the realm of where I was during the heyday of all that stuff now, so it's kind of fun to step back and pass up the torch to all the younger talented artists that are out there today. How did you know Alan and Engelbert?
Well, we promoted Engelbert last year in Singapore. Engelbert, as you know, is half Indian, and
Yes.
and he was craving for Indian food.
Oh, I bet. I think I was in Rome or somewhere in Italy. My favorite country is Italy, and I got a call from Alan. I was in Italy. I was in Monza, I think, outside Milan, and the phone rang, and it was Alan. How are you? Yada, yada, yada. How'd you like to shoot Engelbert Humperdinck? And I said, sure. And so we set it up. He was marvelous. We sat and drank a hell of a lot of wine. I don't know if when you went out, you hit the wine pretty good. We did a pretty good job because I'm a big wine guy, and I made wine for many years. That was a passion of mine. And Engelbert was just fantastic. What an amazing guy at 83 years of age, just spectacular. And just I saw his show when he was here. I went to see the show, and he was just so charming and a wonderful entertainer.
I got some fan questions for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so some fans wrote in, Jezreel from Manila, how do you concentrate knowing that your subjects are famous celebrities? And was there a time that you were starstruck?
I would say there was always times when I was starstruck, and I think in the case of most artists, you're still a bit nervous sometimes going into photo shoots prior to the sessions themselves. I think once the time you become overly confident, you kind of lose that magic, and I think it's important to be aware of everything and realize that I don't know that starstruck's the right word. Sure, I was starstruck. I was sure as hell starstruck the first time I shot David Bowie, and then you come to realize they're just like everybody else. It's just a profession, and they're larger than life. And when you get to know most of them, I would tell Jezreel, I would say, they're just like you and I. It's just that's what they're doing for a living. It's just that they've been glorified, sadly, by people like myself. But it's no more than a profession. We all do what we do, and that just happens to be a facet that gets a little bit more press, and people tend to be more larger than life. But it doesn't make them any more a person or less a person than any of us.
Now a question from Pat. He wants to know what's the most memorable photo shoot with a celebrity you have done, and who is your most favorite subject and why?
Well, probably most memorable in terms of just crazy, because I shot a lot of great people, and I've been really lucky that way. But in terms of memorable, that was wild. I shot the cover for Life magazine with the 5 most powerful women in Hollywood, and I had over here, in one day, I had Barbara Streisand, Jessica Lange, Sally Field, Goldie Hawn, and Jane Fonda. So that's a lot of energy in front of the lens. And so that was a pretty memorable shoot. But, working with people, the likes of Betty Davis, Bette Midler for her whole career. I worked with Bette for 40 years, was, fantastic and really great. And I would say, in terms of shoots that I remember that just really went down and that I loved over the years, Leonardo DiCaprio was probably the most fun and engaging. And I had him during all those great years, the early years when he really was breaking out. And he was as great in front of the still camera as he was on the big screen. And Leo was someone that really put it out there for the still camera back in the days when probably now he's probably more jaded. He's kind of been there and done that. And I think taking still photographs is probably not on the top of his list of favorite things to do. But when we shot together, he was certainly extraordinary to work with and produced extraordinary work in front of the lens.
A question from Paul. He says, hi, Sir Greg. Among the famous celebrities you work with, was there someone who turned out to be different from what you expect them to be? And what advice will you give struggling freelance photographers?
Find another job for that answer. Everybody today is a photographer. They all have a cell phone and Photoshop to prove it. And unfortunately, I wouldn't want to be starting over today. But I would say follow your heart and your vision. Try to find your own voice. I think that's really important. It's tough for photographers today. There's so many photographers today, and there's so many with the onset of autofocus, auto exposure, auto everything. and the fact that you can repair everything with Photoshop, it makes the look at the craft a little bit different. The alteration of photographs changes in many ways, the field of real photography, I think, and it's unfortunate, I think. Obviously, even in the realm of celebrity, with the retouching and everything that goes on, to the extent that sometimes it's crazy, it's not the same as it used to be. I learned early on in my career, never listen to anything that anyone tells you about a celebrity. You don't know if the person got laid the night before. You don't know if their dog got run over by a car. You don't know what their situations were. And I had many cases where I was warned or told this or told that, and I found the situation to be 180 degrees from that. And I had situations where I heard how fantastic somebody was, and I found it to be an asshole. And it just depends on, it's human nature. You don't know. Sometimes it's a luck of the draw. But I think the most important thing I can tell you is in situations like that, go in with an open mind and open book and let them express themselves to you and you vice versa, to build that almost chemical kind of symbiotic exchange before you shoot to see where it's going to take you. Because I oftentimes went in with a colored vision of how someone was going to be and found them to be completely the opposite. I had been warned on Scarface that Pacino was going to be very difficult to put very long lenses on the camera, and I'd probably get thrown off the set. Al and I worked together, I think, 5 or 6 weeks on Scarface, and he was fabulous, and I'd worked with him on many projects since then, and he was incredible. And times when he needed to be on the set to shoot, we'd be off taking stills. So it goes to show you that, if I'm listening to somebody's advice, one, I'm going to be afraid of the stars, intimidated by them, or I'm going to come in with a bitter attitude and a chip on my shoulders. It was the same thing with Mark Wahlberg. I thought he was going to be a total prick in the early days of Marky Mark, and he was great. And and I'm an openly gay person, and I think at the very beginning, Mark, he had kind of like this reputation of being, maybe not so friendly towards gay people. I don't know. It was kind of wild. And you know what? He was fantastic. We shot actually for a cover for a gay magazine, for The Advocate, back in the early days. And Mark and I became really great friends, and I worked with him for many, many years. And he was incredible, just so much fun. So I think, you have to have an open mind and not try to pigeonhole or label anyone before you shoot them.
But I think it also goes the same for life. You just have to have an open mind to everything, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Greg, this has been just an amazing conversation. And before we part ways, final words to your fans throughout the world, what would you like to tell them? Stay safe.
I think the most important thing today is to stay safe, and let's get through this pandemic, and let's make this a better world, and follow your heart and your vision.
Well, I trust our conversation with Greg Gorman will entice you to purchase his latest book, It's Not About Me, and discover his vast body of work. And you can ask for Greg Gorman's newest book at your favorite bookstore or order a copy online. Now, if you're a new viewer to Words and Music and like to find out about other guests we've had on the show, you can visit our website at lamcproductions.com. And while you're there, subscribe on our YouTube channel and social media accounts. That's it for the show this week. Until next week, thank you, and this has been Loretta Alabons.